sincerity, how the church hurts those they seek to help, and how to reverse it. It's a book written by Robert Lupton, which was published in 2011, so it's been around for a while. It was published by HarperCollins, and you can find it online at Amazon or in your local bookstores if you wish to. Lupton is the founder of FCS Urban Ministries in Atlanta, and at the time of the book's writing had brought 40 years of urban ministry experience to this topic. The main idea of his book seems to be that one-way giving often creates dependency and entitlement, resulting in a permanent underclass. Lupton emphasizes that to avoid this, we need to listen, discern, and build relationships with those whom we seek to serve. Here at First Church, we have a long history of giving and partnering, whether it is with Boaz and Ruth, with George Mason, which is a school that we've been intimately involved with since 2002. Boaz and Ruth and George Mason, for example, are both organizations that this church endowed with significant sums of money as a part of our, could someone help with the door, please? Thank you, Mary. Awesome, thank you so much.
Sorry, we apparently do not have the flip ones anymore. We had a flood in the basement, and I think that that's why we don't have any more paper. So if we need it in the future, we can get it.
Okay, you have a dry erase marker in your
Yes.
hand though, which is
Yes.
great.
So we,
Thank you.
When we had a capital campaign many years ago, it resulted in a decision among our members to invest half of what we raised back in the community and the other half to improve our facility. And George Mason, for example, received over $100,000 at that time. And volunteers have been in that school since 2002. Tassie Madden and I and several other members of our church have been involved in distributing those funds as the school demonstrates a need for additional support. So our speakers this morning, let me introduce Murray Withrow. He has been serving the Churchill neighborhood since 2002. He was a French and International Studies major at the University of Richmond. He connected with Churchill Activities and Tutoring, better known as CHAT, a tutoring and mentorship program, and he did that while he was in college. He graduated from University of Richmond in 2006, moved into the neighborhood, and invested more deeply in this local ministry, and I gather you were attending seminary at the same time. Murray is still active at Chat's High School and coaches their basketball team. In 2015, Murray and his wife Lauren and their 3 children began considering whether or not they felt a call for international missionary service. And out of that process, he decided to join Servant Partners, an organization, a national organization which seeks to place missionaries in areas of urban poverty to live out the gospel of Jesus among those with whom they are serving. After his training, he still felt called to Richmond and has become the Richmond site lead for this organization. I'd like to point out that the Withrow home sits directly adjacent to Mosby Court, one of the 4 major public housing communities in Richmond, each housing about 1,500 people. So Murray truly and his family are living within the poorest, one of the poorest areas of our city. He is active with East End Fellowship, which I believe was a church plant of Third Presbyterian, but they are a non-denominational church. His 3 young sons attend George Mason Elementary, and I've had the pleasure of working with Ezra, who is now a second grader, and Murray, who is a third grader and who is an amazing reader and a wonderful role model for his peers there. Joining Murray this morning is Chris Schofield. Chris grew up in Churchill. He attended George Mason Elementary School. He attended VCU, where he was an English major, an awesome major, I might add. And as a youth, he participated in the after-school program at Chat, which is where he began his mentoring relationship with Murray. This year, Chris is working as an English teacher at Churchill Academy, part of the Chat organization, and still lives and serves in the Churchill community in which he grew up. Before I turn the podium over to them, I would like to mention that next Sunday we'll be following this theme with two speakers, Reggie Gordon, who was the former CEO of the Red Cross and who is now on the mayor's team to look at wealth building, particularly within the poorest areas of our city. And Deb Lawrence from St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. She is their community outreach coordinator. Their church has raised $1 million, or promised $1 million over a span of time that we'll learn more about, with the specific purpose of community wealth building, investing and creating jobs in the East End of Richmond. Welcome to the two of you, and I'll let you talk with the rest of us about how you're going to divide your time. And
make use of that as well. Thanks,
thank
Carolyn.
you.
Good morning. Good morning. It is great to be here. It's actually my first time at First Presbyterian Church. I've crossed down Carey Street here many, many times, but my first time in the building and worshiping and fellowshipping with everyone. So thanks for having Chris and me. We're real excited to be here. Until a couple people sat down, I thought, is it mandatory in all Presbyterian churches for the first row to be empty? So thank you for bucking that trend and making us feel more at home. So.
Only true Clemson Tiger fans.
Oh, I understand. Well,
or those who members of Westminster Canterbury.
I understand. Well, we'll see. I grew up in Ohio, so we'll see if our teams meet again. There's been a little rivalry there, but he's gotten the better end of the bargain lately. So.
Lately, yes. Say again?
You kind of handled us last time.
Yeah, we're a little nervous. Yeah. Well, so class, did y'all read the book? Actually, I wasn't sure if actually people read the book or it was just an idea that was, because I was asked to teach on this book. Has anyone read this book? I'm just curious. Okay, so a few people. No worries, it's not a requirement. I just wanted to teach, treat you like my class there for a moment and have some fun. But it is a great book. For those who've read the book, do you want to just like take a stab at just like a very quick summary? What do you think? And actually, Carolyn kind of gave the answer away, so if you were listening earlier. But I'm just kind of curious, someone from the crowd could like, what's the main point of the book? Anyone? Yeah.
Well, it's easy to create power over people when you're the giver and they're always the recipient. And that, in a way, that is toxic charity.
Yeah.
It's not listening to the person and it's power.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So this concept of Christians with compassionate hearts and connections to resources and understanding some of the realities of poverty, that they want to do something about that. In doing so, not always recognizing how complex those issues can be, and even through very genuine compassionate hearts and giving and service, can actually still create situations of dependency and a power dynamic being actually reinforced in many ways, and some unhealthy relationships and situations that can develop from that, and then looking at that and saying, wow, where did we go wrong with this, or what can we do about that? I think Bob Lupton does a really good job of analyzing that, especially over a long period of time of his own actual experiences, and then writing those things down so that we can learn from those. And I'm not really sure that we'll never make mistakes when we do ministry or whatever the case might be, but hopefully we can mitigate those and we can be as wise and as fruitful as possible as we have hearts to be involved with issues of poverty, which is a really good inclination to have. I actually want to just pause for a second and just say a prayer for the rest of our time. while I do that, do you mind drawing the pond and the fisherman thing? Okay. Awesome. This is so good that there's two of us today. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for a chance on the Sabbath to come together and to study this very important topic of your heart for people in poverty and how you've created us all in the image of God and that we are all beautiful, and it is good that we want to reach out to our fellow man, but help us to understand through your word and through our own experiences and the wisdom and knowledge that you provide for us and experience that we have to do that well. I just thank you so much for this group of people and their desire to learn more about these things and the opportunity that's given to me and Chris to be able to do this as well. We pray your blessing upon this time in Jesus' name. Amen. Oh no, you're doing well. You're doing well. I just want to mention that, so this is our first time doing this particular teaching, so this is a really great opportunity for us. So we thank you for that. I want to mention that a number of the concepts come from the book itself, but also from a partner organization that I've done an asset-based community development training through called Embrace Richmond. And actually I let Ingrid Addison, hey there, I know she couldn't be here today, but I let her know about Embrace Richmond and we had a conversation about that. I'm going to leave this resource with you all because this is even more their expertise than me and Chris, but it's an organization that's here in Richmond that works with communities in poverty, but especially with connecting churches with those realities. So I just wanted you to know about that resource. They actually have a training going on right now. They did the first week, and there'll be 5 more subsequent weeks that if anyone were interested, the information is on there. The woman who leads that organization, her name is Wendy McKay, and she's a friend of mine.
I will send this out via email to everyone.
Wonderful. Great, thanks. So let's just think about this metaphor for a second. I think this can be a helpful way to approach this topic. Let's say we have a gentleman in need at the top there. There's also a pond. So there's a resource available. This man needs and wants fish. Then we have a line which represents the barrier between him and his circumstances and many other people in his society, even within his city. They're not far away, but there are barriers and obstacles. This person has a big heart. That's the heart that Chris drew. They're compassionate. They're loving. They've become more aware of these realities of this person or of even what this person represents. And they're also not just an individual, but connected to a church body. So they have resources as an individual, but they also are connected to larger resources and networks that could be made to bear on the situation. We'll posit the question, what are some ways that the gentleman who doesn't have fish could get fish? What are different ways that need could be met? Or we'll just make that.
Learn how to fish.
Could learn how to fish. So, Chris, you can write some of these down.
Someone might need to give him a pole.
Yes. Oh, actually.
If he doesn't know how to make one.
Stick with them. You have your sheet, or you know him.
I know.
Okay, you're good. Oh, he's not. Look at this guy. Okay.
Well, I mean, we'll see what
Because you can kind of make 2 columns, the one that we'll have, or if you don't have to write down everything.
How
Okay.
about teaching him how to make a fishing pole?
Okay, good. So knowledge. He could be taught how to fish, but also the pole itself. Because does he have a pole? Not, at least not in the picture. He doesn't have a certain resource, but there's the resource and the knowledge. Okay, what else?
Obviously, he could be given a fish.
He could be given a fish. Literally, someone could give him a fish, such as the guy from the church. Very good. Anything else? Okay, so all ideas are good, and that's helpful. We're going to have sort of several in particular that we want to highlight, such as give a fish. Of course, a person could also give
Bait.
bait. You need, he needs bait.
He needs
as well.
to either
Exactly.
find the bait or be
tackle,
given the bait.
All of the equipment, those resources, all of that.
He could work for a fish.
What's that?
He could work for a fish.
He could work for a fish. Very good. Yeah, so there are a number of different things going on here. All of that's really good. And also I'll just say with giving a fish, like sometimes when we're looking to help, we can give money, which they may use to get a fish, or literally give the fish, as was mentioned before. What are some of the? Yeah.
Could you fish with him?
I don't see why not.
I mean, that's,
Yes, no, that's great. Yeah, you can just kind of put that along the list of ideas there. That's great. What are some of the pros and cons of the first concept that we're going to highlight here? Give a person a fish. What are some of the pros and cons of that method of?
It's a one-time deal.
Okay.
You give a fish, the fish is gone, back to square one.
Right, right. Very good.
Creates a dependency.
It could create dependency, right? Because the person didn't really work for it, and it doesn't build up that work ethic, and it may, if they're, in their mind, they're thinking, if they'll just give me a fish again, why do anything differently? This is kind of working out for me in a way. Yeah.
Could
And he
create
can't-
snowballing effect.
A snowballing effect, meaning,
Meaning he might tell his friends who don't
Right.
like fish either, and
Right.
like, look, if you just,
Mhm.
you can go here and they'll just give you one.
right,
And
okay.
so then it's just. it
Good
keeps-
point, good point. That could actually create somewhat of a culture.
Culture.
Not just an individual
Culture of
culture,
dependency.
but a culture of dependency among peers and such. Good.
The other snowball could roll towards, he could teach his children how to fish. If
Right,
he knew how to make a pole. and
right. So if we went in that
He knew
direction,
what time of day,
yep,
do
great.
something about it.
Yeah, good. And actually, you could put number 2 then, since it's been named at this point in time. Good. What about is there anything positive about it?
You get faster results by
Okay,
giving
yeah,
the fish.
it's very efficient, isn't it? Yeah, that's true. Good. Any other thing positive else about that?
Relieves the need. In
Yeah.
other words, I don't have food.
Right.
And
So
I'm getting this fish.
Yeah.
Now I'm not hungry anymore.
right. So it does like he does eat for that day, and that is important. That is a good thing in and of itself. But as Bob Lupton points out in the book, he differentiates between relief and development. Have you used those terms? Have you heard those terms used before in this type of situation? It's this idea that giving a fish is really good in certain circumstances, those of relief, those of crisis. But in more normal circumstances, it tends to be more negative because of all the things that you named. So I think as you get into this, we can quickly move into sort of a negative space that is reactionary against giving a fish, like, no, that's a horrible thing. Well, it can be bad, but there actually are some moments in time. Hurricane Katrina, absolutely, get down there as fast as possible, take a ton of supplies, take food, take medical equipment. Don't have people work for it. That like they're hanging out by a thread, you know, like absolutely put those things out there, give them away freely and liberally. That is a very appropriate and a very important response in a time of crisis, that you bring that relief. But in other circumstances where it's not a crisis, that tends to create that culture of dependency. So that's where we can move into some of these other ideas of teaching to fish. And we'll get there in just a second. I want to share a story that's actually very similar to the story in the book. So if you've read the book, you'll probably recognize this. But when I was working at Chat, so this would have been like maybe 5 years ago, for a number of years we had a Christmas gift program that was exactly what was said earlier. It was extremely efficient and it met the need in a very direct way. We had churches like yourselves around Richmond who were really compassionate and had resources and heard about the children we were working with, and that they might not get a lot of gifts at Christmas time, like that, and their heart is touched by that. So they go out and buy tons of gifts, new stuff, really good stuff, which we asked them to do. And they would wrap it real nice, bring it to Church Hill. We would gather all of those gifts, and then we would head out on a certain day, and we would corral a few volunteers and go deliver the gifts. The kids were so happy, and for a volunteer to deliver that gift and to see that kid's face, it's a really good feeling. However, over time, we started to pick up on a little more nuances of, in delivering those gifts, almost feeling, someone once used the word like a parade. Like we paraded into Mosby Court, and there's like people looking out their windows, like gawking at us. And then like, the parent opens, and like the parent opens the door, and they're somewhat happy like for their kid. I mean, every parent loves to see their kid get provided for and to be happy. But there was a sense of like, they had no role in that. So perhaps their dignity was compromised on some level. Bob talks about it that he basically had the same experience. So we were, and actually what happened as a staff team, the week after the Christmas gift delivery, we sat down, and then we had Bob Lupton came to Richmond and visited and gave a lecture, and we went and he told that story from the book. And we came back and we're like, all right, we need to sit down and talk. And so we decided to move in a different direction the next year, opening up a Christmas store. And we talked with the parents, we talked with the students, and then we also got the parents involved. Not a lot, but I remember one particular good friend of mine who's a parent who helped serve at the Christmas store. And just how like the vibe was totally different. That parents came and they used their own money to buy the gifts. They also had more choice. They picked out the gifts as opposed to just someone else picking it out. And it was just a very different atmosphere, a lot more dignity, a lot more ownership of the process. And then even other things that we didn't even expect or couldn't see in advance that happened that were really beautiful. But my friend, she bought my kids a gift. So she was there working at the store, which was pretty neat in and of itself because she was serving as well, not just being a recipient. She was buying gifts for her kids at greatly reduced prices, but still her doing that action. But then she was like, we were talking, and she was like, I want to get this for your kids. Don't they need a coat? Because I think we were talking about how we were going to get a new coat for Murray. And it was just one of the greatest gifts. And like, what price could you put on that experience for her as a mother to be able to provide for me, a more middle-class person? So these ideas of exchange were happening, and relationship was being built. So a lot of the negative things that could come with the give-a-fish way of doing things can be mitigated by involving people in the ministry and not keeping them, you talk about the power dynamic where like I'm always giving, they're always receiving, which kind of reinforces like a certain God complex in us that feels good but is actually really not good for us. Do you want to share your story about it?
100%. I have a few thoughts. Before I get into the story, I'm going to explain something. Coming from Churchill, I'm sure you guys, you've heard of slang. We use a lot of slang. So I'm explaining something. I think it's just funny, just because sometimes when I talk, I forget that people aren't from where I'm from. And so I was talking to my roommate the other day, and I was explaining how someone had made me frustrated. I was like, yeah, she was just coming out of pocket. And I walked off, and he was just sitting there like, I'm sorry, can you just tell me what that is? Just define that phrase. So yeah, Churchill, I came to Chow when it kind of first started. I think actually a couple of years, around like 2003, 2004 area. So I'm 23 right now, so this is like 10 years ago. No, it's more. I always think it's 2014. It was like 14 years ago. And Percy's basement, we would do one-on-one tutoring, or we would try our best to do one-on-one tutoring. Sometimes I would tutor myself, or I would just read alone. And so we would go into Percy's living room. There would be verse of the day, some conversation, questions. We disperse for like 30, 40 minutes. We read, do homework, do reading, play games, come back. And throughout that time, Percy, Murray, or in the later years as it became me, as I started volunteering and working for Chat, would just go around, observe the students, and when there was like an exceptional student for that day, or maybe two, they would star it, and we would come back, they would give away bones. And bones is like it just means monies. And so I'm like, all right, today's bones winner is, for example, it was me, Chris Schofield, and he would give me a $5 bill. And we had that practice for a while, and it was fine, right? I don't think it was one of those things where you could, I don't know, it was just like, it wasn't great, but it was just like whatever. Kids enjoyed it. It wasn't too expensive necessarily, especially when you have one site, it's like expensive, $10 a week. But as we grew as an organization, we started thinking about, I think it's something I struggle with as a teacher as well, this idea of like bribery we sometimes have with children and our students. Like, and it's hard to get away from it, sometimes it's like, even with that best of kids, like I have a student, he loves basketball, but he's so unfocused, and I was just like, if you just do well in this class, if you get an A, I'll buy you whatever jersey you want. And it's difficult because when I say that, he latches onto the jersey much more than the class. And so he comes talk to me and he's like, hey, look up a Donovan Mitchell jersey. Ooh, Jason Tatum, I like Jason Tatum. Ben Simmons, what is that? I'm like, can you just go to that? But I'm like, you're actually skipping class to talk to me about that. And so, yeah, bribery becomes a weird thing where it's like, what is the kid focusing on? The thing that we're giving them, or the actual lesson or the actual teaching that we're trying to get them to, to join in on. And so chat moved away from giving away money into something more along the lines of group activities, such as going out to eat. I think laser tag was kind of big for a while. Just other things throughout the week that was more centered around like you with members of the community, volunteers, or the leader of the site. And yeah, I remember when I was leading the tutoring site around like 2015, 2016, I did Bones, and it was so much fun, and it was such a better, I guess, gift to the students, even though it required more work from myself, because I'd actually drive the short bus, and I had to be present with them for about an hour and a half to 2 hours longer in a day. But it was really phenomenal where we would go, usually to Chick-fil-A. This is when Chick-fil-A like really blew up, and we love Chick-fil-A in chat. We would go to Chick-fil-A, and the students loved it. They always, like, no student was ever complained about us going to Chick-fil-A. We would go there, they would get their meal, and we'd sit and we'd talk. And I had some of the younger kids, they'd go play. There's one kid in particular, he was just kind of short for his age. But he kind of loved it because he got to go play in the pen with all the other kids. He'd be like, am I tall enough? And I would look at him, and I kind of guess. I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he would just go play in the thing, and they would, and it was just cool. They would see like a different side of me, because I'm the guy that usually like has that conversation, especially as you begin to oversee more things. You unfortunately become like the bad guy. Like I'd come in when like a tutor prayer is working out, like, hey, this is why you're being a bad child right now, or like, I would get encouragements here and there, but I was always an authority figure. But sitting down for dinner, I'm this guy eating a sandwich, looking around, and they would just ask me questions like, do you like this? No, I don't. And then I would sit there again, and they were like, oh, okay, do you like this? I do, we can talk about this. And so it's just like a really good way to build a relationship with the students. We spent actually more money, I think, because Chick-fil-A isn't the cheapest place. And it was also just like a little adventure. We jumped on the bus, we went out to eat, we went to other places, and it felt we were giving them not just money, but we were giving them community. Maybe a sort of small experience. Not all of our students are able to eat out. I think even myself, I forget that eating out requires two pretty important things, a vehicle and disposable income. And so for some students, that is like a gift to just go outside of Church Hill for a little bit and to eat out with some friends, especially when it's their friends. I mean, yeah, it was just great. And so that was another way in which we saw something that was fine. Like I don't think, like even now, I don't like mind like if I like little bets here and there. Like I'm kind of bad about like, hey kid, I'll bet you $1 I'll make this half-court shot. And so I still, sometimes it's fun to do those things, but it's more important to focus on relationship building activities, relationship building gifts. And so, yeah, that's just one way.
Yeah, thanks. That's good. Yes, we're kind of like moving from a more transactional reward to a more relational reward that had so many other benefits that came with it.
Yeah, and the kids don't even remember what was before, which is a really phenomenal thing. That when you change something, sometimes you're like, well, they like it. They dislike a lot of things, and if you can kind of like ground out like a week or two of change, they generally like come on board.
Yep. Good. We'll talk about the teach the fish. Do you mind drawing the little Jesus fish by the dude and then the pole? So I didn't realize how difficult it is to draw the Jesus fish. I kept messing it up when I was practicing. I was like, let Chris do it. So the fish represents the. The fish represents number one, give a fish. That's one way. The pole is more teach to fish, as we were talking about. And actually, I want to highlight Carolyn and other volunteers who come to George Mason, because I think it's a really great example of teaching to fish, and that my family particularly benefited from with K2 Cadre once a month in the morning before school, where parents are encouraged to come with their children, and they're paired up with a volunteer who knows certain literacy activities and also has different resources, and you sit down together and you teach your child together. You teach the child/student together, and then the resources are given to the parent to then take home. So we take all these activities, flashcards and number games and books even, take those home and encourage to do that at home as well. And I think it's a really great example, because then they're able to continue that, and the parent can take ownership of it. Also, for me, I don't know if I told you all this, but it was a huge blessing to build community with the other parents. I would go partially because my kids they'd get really mad at me if we missed K2 cadre. I'll tell you, man, they do like the treats there, so some incentives I think do work. But they wanted those treats, but they wanted to be there and read the books as well. But as a parent and as a pastor in the community, part of my vision was connecting with the other parents and with the volunteers. It was a really effective way to do that. So I just want to highlight that and say thanks, and I think it's a really great ministry and that our family has been blessed by. But it also kind of segues into number 3, which is this concept. Oh, actually, it's going to be the next one. Well, let's hold on to that. There's a concept called gather the fishermen. It's going to be number 4. But number 3, what I want to talk about is, say the person has a pole, they have tackle, they have bait, they have access to the pond, they have the knowledge and skills to fish. But then there remains the question, what if the pond, though, is polluted? What if the fish are diseased? What do we do then? So this idea of improving the pond. And so what you're going to start to see here is that there's multiple layers in community development. Each piece is important and plays a part, but any one of them by themselves is not really going to get you to successful community development and flourishing, what we would call shalom in the Bible. So we need to pay attention to this one of improve the pond. And actually, Chris, do you want to share about MLK in that regard?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I went to, my trajectory towards college was I went to George Mason Elementary School. It's funny, I started to feel old, but I don't even really know.
You're in the wrong class.
I always talk about, because I'm always around children, I'm like, yeah, I'm just so much older than you. Because I'm not nearly. So I left George Mason in 2005. Yes. I started MLK, I went to Richmond Community High School, then on to VCU. George Mason, not my bad, MLK was in a very old building when I went to it. I think it was built in the 60s or the 70s. It had like, I think, there's certain design structures that we don't really think about, but they're sort of oppressive, and as a kid you can't really name them. But one thing that I remember about MLK that I detested was our windows weren't like this. We had the windows that were very thick and foggy, and they were about half this size, and then they were long, and it had like a lever. There was like a border, right? So there's 2 panes, and then there was like a lever where you could unhook the bottom pane and just push it out. And I hated it as a kid. I was like, I always felt like I could never see the outside, and I always never get enough air. It's like that's not how wind works. It doesn't just come up. I always just hated it. And it was a very small building. It was 2 floors. It was one of those buildings that the second floor didn't actually extend all the way through the building. So about half of the building had a second floor, and we had hallways. There was 1 hallway for the 6th graders, 1 for the 7th, 1 for the 8th, and then another part. And the school was pretty bad. I could tell some really this is sort of funny. I've always been a nervous pooper in public. I hated it ever since I was a kid. I was one of those kids that actually needed that book, Everybody Poops. MLK is the worst for those kind of kids because there were no doors on the stalls. There weren't any locks for the stalls. They did have doors, and they're really short. So I remember one time I was just using a restroom and some dude was just like, "What's up?" Hey. And it was just like a tough school in ways. Like not a lot of kids did academically well. I think my first grading period, I think I got A's out of boredom. Like I just didn't have any I just didn't know how to engage with the people in my class because they never focused and they were always talking about things I didn't know about. So I just did work. And yeah, just bad reading scores. I remember I was in this. I'm so many stories. I remember one time I was accidentally placed in a reading. Like an enhanced reading course. It was just an accident, but I never actually talked to anyone about it. So this entire year, I had this course where I was just like, I had to learn to read, but I already knew how to read, and so I was just chilling, and kids would come up to me. And I remember one kid, he looked at me, and he's just kind of like nodding his head because I was teaching him something. He was like, "Pretty smart." I was like, "Yeah, I can." And I remember that experience because he just was like, yeah, he just like, go do something about it. Like, I don't know, it was like, it's one of those things where it's like, you can do something that I can't. I guess it's like that Goodwill Hunting with Ben Affleck tells Matt Damon, like, you gotta go. Like, we don't want to be here. You need to leave. And so it's that small way where it's just like, not a lot of good readers. Like doing bad at school is accepted. Much more focused on getting girls and playing sports. And that building they tore it down. They tore it down in a way that, you know, I wish they didn't. They would tear it down. They would put students in one half, tear that half down, rebuild it, move the kids over, and tear down the other half. The new school is phenomenal. It's you know, it's at least 2 to 3 times as, probably more than that. It's so huge. The facility is just up to standard. The gymnasium's amazing. There's so many great things, but it's still the community. The students there are still acting just as crazy as I was when they were when I was there. One of my former roommates is a teacher there now, and I was asking like, "Hey, how's it going?" He was like, "Well, someone set a trash can on fire during that pep rally." I was like, "Oh, that happens, I guess." And it shows that and it's difficult because MLK needed a new school. I mean, it serves, how many students go there?
800.
800, yeah, and so it serves a great number of students. They needed a new school building, but even with the new school building, they haven't improved their scores at all. And even the infrastructure of the school, the staffing has changed so many times, and it's difficult. My sister is going through the same sort of system that I went to, and she's a lot better than me. It's funny how much of a better person she is than me. But she's sweet. I was asking her how school is going, and she was like, "It's hard." And I was like, "Why is it hard?" She was like, "The teacher just can't help me." She was like, "I want to learn," and I'm like, but just like the teacher just can't reach me because of the other distractions in the classroom. So this is a situation where I guess you could say aesthetically the pond is better, right? You know, I don't know how far to go with the metaphor. I'm not.
Well, we'll put it this way. Do you think the kids, regardless of test scores, deserve a good facility?
Oh, 100%. Everyone deserves the best thing we can offer them.
Right.
But unfortunately, yeah, I think there's an unfortunate thought process where, especially just me going to college, and it's something I think about a lot coming from Churchill, is that I just had I think my mindset growing up in my community was just ideal for someone who didn't want to be there. I just don't like drugs, just naturally. I just never really thought well of them. I preferred playing with my friends and more like fun ways of like going to the park. I love cartoons. I just naturally disliked all the things that were very present in my community. I never wanted to be in a gang. I never wanted to skip school. Well, I did actually. I wanted to skip school sometimes, but I was just to watch TV. And I was just naturally not inclined to a lot of things, and I think it's tough because that natural inclination was one of the, I don't know, it is just incredibly helpful for an environment that pushes drugs very heavily, that pushes gang involvement, that just pushes this idea of you don't need school or education, and I was really good at reading and I was just good at school, and so.
Can I make a correlation?
Yeah, it's just like, oh, you guys.
Go ahead, finish your thought.
I was just saying that with MLK is that unfortunately, even though the school is new and brighter, the outside is still the same. So the students who are going to do well are just the students that would have done well with the old school, because we're not helping the Mosby Court area where those kids go home and no one's telling them to finish their schoolwork, or even to bring a backpack to school. And so it's just the building's new, but everything around it's the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing some of your personal experiences. I think that helps color the whole situation. But so as you can see, like having a new facility, it is really important. Improving the pond is important, but it by itself is not gonna, because there are some people who would tell me like, oh yeah, they have that great new middle school at MLK in Churchill. I bet, are the kids really thriving now? And I was like, no, they're not, because there's a lot of other factors that need to go at play to make that. But I absolutely think it was the right decision for them to make a new school. And actually, we're coming across this right now with George Mason, as Carolyn would know. George Mason's infrastructure is actually even worse than what MLK was at that time. There are like bathrooms that are broken. They replaced the AC units, but they were broken AC units. There were some rats in the building and cockroaches and stuff. There were tiles falling from the ceiling. There were water leaking. There was mold growing in certain places.
Like a gas thing?
There was a gas problem. Yeah, they're not allowed to drink from the water fountains because they thought that the levels of lead they passed like FDA standards, but they didn't pass RPS standards, which are a little bit higher. So it's really my children. They when they have to go to the bathroom, talk about going to the bathroom, like they hold it and they just wait to the end of the day, and when they come home, they go to the bathroom because they're just not comfortable going there. So here's a situation where like the pond needs to be improved, absolutely, but it doesn't mean in doing so automatically everything else is going to be successful and thrive. So I think we just keep in mind the holistic approach here. I'm going to point out one other point, and then we'd love to kind of open the floor for thoughts and questions and ideas for everyone.
We have about 15 minutes.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. So this idea of gathering the fishermen, there's actually a story in the book that I'll highlight where there was a soup kitchen, which is more along the lines of give a fish type ministry, and it was not going so well, and the recipients were just coming year after, week after week, month after month, year after year. No one's lives were really being improved that much, but also the relationships between the recipients and the givers was getting more antagonistic because it was like, no, you're taking too much soup. You gotta wait, the next one. Like, you already came through the line. What are you doing here? And there's all these different like antagonistic, adversarial relationships that are developing. So, but they started to approach things with some of Lupton's ideas of community development. They started to build relationship with the recipients and actually offer them to be a part of the process of getting the food, serving the food. And over time, that ownership was a really motivating and inspirational factor to where they started making decisions about how everything would happen. And then they would even like start to do recipes and create different meals. And then there were like 4 community members who were getting so involved and taking so much ownership that they expressed this idea of making a restaurant. And they wanted, that was like, it became a dream of theirs. And the church that was supporting this financially and in other connections, they came behind it, and they eventually opened up a restaurant run by the community members in their community called Tummy and Soul. And it's just like this beautiful story of like the relationships that developed, but also how dependency was decreased and people's lives were actually practically changed and got better to where they're not just recipients, but they're actually providing for their own community. And it also provided an example for others of what could take place. But that couldn't happen unless the gathering of the fishermen, or fisher people, thanks, could happen. So in community development, thinking about how are we bringing people together? Because in our model, oh yeah, thanks for the drawing. Even that guy, when he was given a fish, taught to fish, given the resources, the pond is improved, he's catching fish, he's happy, but it's still just one person. We're talking about community development, not just individual betterment. So, individual betterment has its value, and I never want to diminish or downplay the importance and significance of one person's life being changed. Absolutely, that's so important. But there's a whole community of people in need, and in different ways, not just materially, but oftentimes socially and spiritually. I actually think social and spiritual poverty is much greater in my neighborhood than material poverty. And that even changes how we approach things as far as like, money plays a role and it's important, but there's actually other things that are, I think, in this situation more important. So those are some of the concepts, and I'll mention 2 other concepts in a moment, but that we're not going to really like dive into. But I just wanted to open the floor for like comments, questions.
Going back to your experience Okay. I've worked in schools for about 15 years in the Richmond schools. And what always strikes me is among the chaos, there are teachers who can achieve successful environments in their own classroom that really stand out. You really can walk in a classroom and in 4 seconds you know whether or not kids can learn in there.
Yeah.
Are we doing enough to prepare teachers to achieve their goals?
I'll give you a stab at that if you'd like as a budding teacher.
Yeah, teacher's really hard. I think it's funny. I think my third day teaching, I realized the most difficult thing is kind of what you were saying is I have to motivate them to learn. And I was blown away when I realized that. Just because I was trying to get them to teach all these things, I was like, why do you guys want to learn? It's like, oh wait, is that also my job? Like, to get you guys to want to learn? I texted a friend, I was like, I want to quit right now. It is an unfortunate job, unfortunate position of the teacher is just how much socially we require them to be responsible for a child's education. More so than sometimes even a student or the parent. I've seen some really great teachers throughout my years. I think RPS is in a lot of crossroads because I think there's a lot of different ideas, a lot of, how can I say this? Well, for teachers, I think frustration with RPS teachers are how they're supported. The bureaucracy is always a complaint. I think bureaucracy is always a complaint, I mean, wherever you go, but a lot of people feel frustrated in how schools are run, especially in schools where the principal is constantly changing hand or staff are changing hand. A lot of times during schools there's like this grand shuffling, like this teacher isn't doing well at this elementary school, so we're going to put them in this middle school. This high school teacher isn't doing well, so we're going to put them in this elementary school. And so teachers get kind of shuffled around and no one new is entered in. There's also hiring deficiencies. I think RPS had nearly 100 positions maybe that weren't filled, and so that puts teachers and other staff members into a position of having to deal with more than they naturally would have. And then with building spaces, like how good of a teacher can you be if you're nauseous because of the smell in the school, or how good of a teacher can you be if you come in and all of your supplies are water damaged because a leak. And so I think unfortunately RPS, especially in my neighborhood, has not been in a position to help, or has not helped. I don't know, being in a position I think might be a political statement, I don't want to get into that, but has not necessarily helped all the teachers, and they don't feel validated or supported. Because the job is hard. You're dealing with kids who have so much, trauma. Like as a man, I don't know, it's hard for me because I think sometimes, especially female students, don't desire my help at all. I think, especially being a black man, I represent some figure or somebody who's either abused or misled or been astray. So sometimes I'll see them, I'm like, hey, I can help you, and they're just like, nope. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess I can't help you at all. And so that's another thing, is that when they see us, we can sometimes be something they've seen before. We could, just being a white man, we could be some other white man who has not treated them well in some grade earlier. And so there's so many different things with it that, unfortunately, I think it is difficult for a teacher to do well when supplies are short, building space isn't ideal. They just don't feel very supported. And so, but grace to God, there's still some amazing teachers who do a phenomenal job of creating helpful environments, like even in George Mason. I forget my little brother.
Yeah, Miss Haynes.
Yeah, my little brother's his name is LeGavin. He is 15 years my junior, and he is the same grade as Murray's son. And they were in a class together, and it was a phenomenal class with a great teacher who did a good job of guiding the resources and using them in a good way. And so there are teachers who, despite everything, can do really well. But again, unfortunately, it's a lot tougher than it should be.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, as adults and members of the community, I'm trying to figure out how I can make the pond better. the word that seems most important to me is the word discipline. I heard a slogan, like discipline is not the enemy of creativity. The corollary that I've come up with is discipline is the friend of education and learning. And to use the fisherman metaphor, I mean, a fisherman could go down there with a basket and wait for the fish to jump into it, and he may wait a long time and get very frustrated. Or go down with a pole and not have the discipline to learn the time of day he needs to go and where the water's deepest and where the fish like to hide. And if he doesn't have the discipline to apply to that pole,
Right.
then he suffers still.
Yeah.
And it takes thought and effort on everybody's side, but
Right.
without discipline, I mean,
Yeah.
how does this school provide a disciplined environment where the kids feel like they're safe
Right.
and that if they learn, they're not going to get criticized by their peers for it?
Yeah. So I'll sort of backtrack just for a second and echo Chris's thoughts. I think the environment is extremely difficult, that there are lots of kids with traumatic backgrounds, lots of kids growing up in broken homes, and they're not being taught certain work ethic and discipline and certain like soft skills and things like that. And so it's extremely daunting for a teacher. I think there are some examples of like a master teacher who I think also with a certain group of kids is able to actually produce some good things in the classroom, but that's more the exception to the rule. And even this past year, there were 2 really great teachers that we were thinking our children might be in their class coming into this school year. Both teachers left, and I was talking with them at the end of the year, and they're just burnt out. It's just so hard. So I just wanted to comment on that.
We are all hearing about that.
Yeah, and so like I almost feel like we need like behavior specialists accompanying each teacher because they're trying to deal with discipline and behavior and many other social realities that they're not even getting around to academics. And then that can be unfortunately reinforced sometimes in the community because there's a larger, and then that gets into a whole nother category of like, how did we get there in the first place? Which some of that goes back to, I think there's always like personal choice, and we can't condone any individual for like choices they've made if they're poor decisions, but there's also systemic realities as well. And I think oftentimes we go far on one end or the other, like all people in poverty, it's because there's an oppressive system that has done this to them. I think that's going too far. There's also other people who will say, those people are just lazy and like they're not trying. I think that's also not good. I think there's always a combination of those things floating around, and case by case, you can figure out what's going on, which to me, I think a word that I would put alongside this would be relationship. That we can't understand people's circumstances until we actually know them. And that to me goes back to the barrier. So while I love the fact that the person with the compassionate heart might cross the barrier to give a fish and then retreat back into their comfort zone, what does it look like for more and more people to cross those barriers, things like race, class, culture, language, and actually build friendships there and understand this? That's why like when I see a panhandler, I rarely give money, but I almost always do something. If I have the time, we were together just a week or so ago, and a guy approached us when we were sitting out talking, and he wanted money for a hotel. I didn't give it to him, and I was pretty direct with him that I was not going to give him money. But I was also like trying to be loving and compassionate and let him know, like, can we go grab some food? I'd love to hear more of your story. I feel like I can't even help you well unless I really know the circumstances. Plus, I want to build a relationship. So there's just a couple strands of thoughts there. Yeah.
Loaded question. First of all, Richmond Public Schools this year in the East End, there are 8 schools. And I think for the first time in probably 10 years, all the principals came back, which is a huge step in the right direction. But what is the root cause? What is the root cause of all that we're sitting here trying to solve? What do we do? What is the one thing that we can do to actually flip it.
Mhm.
Because, I mean, again, you brought it up early in the conversation. Look, the East End of Richmond, there are more organizations giving more money, more time, and yet the results are the same. So I mean, between Chat, Richmond Community of Caring, Communities in School, Child Savers, I mean, let's go there, and God knows how many more. And yet, statistically, we're still in the same place. And MLK, the conversation in MLK, you know, I appreciate your honesty about that, because the culture hasn't changed. So what is the root cause, and what can we, and how do we then step and address it?
Yeah.
Well, I think you're right. Statistics are very funny to me, because I think statistics mean a lot more to people outside of the statistics. Not to frustrate, because statistics are meaningful things, but for myself, I have my family. So so let's think about generationally.
And sorry, go ahead and do this, and this will be our
Yeah,
last
we
thing.
just
I'm
need
so
to-
sorry
hate
that we
to cut
ran
it
out
off,
of time.
but this
But
is
you
a
go
great
ahead,
conversation.
you close our,
Go ahead and finish.
Sorry. So there's my mother, my aunt. I have two aunts, and so there's these three women, and they all have basically just a high school education, and then they all have their children. My mother has 4 children. My aunt has 2. Both of them have 2. And so now we moved from 3 women with a high school education to, what is it, 4, 8 children there. And it is a little disheartening, because several of my cousins don't even have high school diplomas, and so there's a few people with just GEDs and very low reading levels. But there is myself and my other cousin who college educated, and then there are my 2 younger siblings who have that same possibility. And for them, I think Chat and these programs mean a lot, because I mean, it's weird to conflate myself, but it is an amazing thing to think of, like, in a system where you don't know anyone who's really done much. Like, most people work things like food service, maybe janitorial, some sort of like hospitality thing, like a receptionist. I know my brother's seen things differently, because he knows that his older brother went to college. My sister sees things differently. She knows her older brother went to college, and they know that their cousin also went to college. And I don't think college is a savior, but they know that that is a possibility, right? They see those things, they don't seem as abstract, they don't seem so far away. I think, unfortunately, things are really hard. And it's tough, because we all want things to go away as quickly as they can. No struggle is ever asked to the extent I've never prayed to God and be like, yeah, can you just keep me in this place longer? We all want to just be out of, we want to be out of it. And I think it's tough when you're with this community that so many people wanted to be out of it. Even itself is just like, there's so much crying and frustration as they want to be out of it. But it's just a really long process. And I think if we look at statistics and we look at things, it begins to, again, just grow more like, what's going on, like, why aren't things getting better? The mayor released a poverty report that's really interesting, and it talks about the poverty in Richmond. It talks about why it's so unique, and it talks about, like, this institutionally, like, I mean, it's a wonder where, there's what was it, 4 or 5 different housing projects, barely mile, like maybe a mile less in some cases apart from each other. So these intense congregation of people that aren't paying taxes really, that have a community that barely owns cars, barely makes more than sometimes $15,000 a year, and so we're just kind of putting poor people with poor people. But all I say is that I think a lot of these organizations have experienced a lot of hope in their members, and there's beauty. I don't know exactly what anyone can do or what any organization can do, just one thing. But I do think as we more so consider ourselves, just trying to help our fellow man, and even myself, I feel the same way, because my cousin has 2 children and GED, and sometimes I get so mad at him. I'm like, will you do something? It's like, will you just stop living your life like this and just do something? I just get so mad at him because it's like, it seems so evident to me. It's just like, it just blows my mind that he's gonna do something. But it's just also like, is that what is best for him? For me to yell at him and to like look at me, like I've done these things with the same resources, or is it me just to love him and say, hey, like, how can we do this together? What do you need from me? So I think just that posture is what the community needs until it can figure itself out. Even though I suppose that is the most frustrating thing to hear, is that you have to be more loving and more compassionate and give more things when you've already given so much. And so yeah, I think in this circumstance, Churchill and other communities showed us that God's love for us is in the same way that you really don't get it yet. Like it is phenomenal how hard it is to love people. And I guess that's what we require, just more love and more attention. And yeah, I'm with you. It's super frustrating. I wish more of my peers had a heart that desired more than what they see around them.
Yep. Thank you, Chris, and thanks everyone for having us. I'd love to continue the conversation too. I think there's many more layers, but we have to wrap it up for now. And so thank you so much for having us. Yeah, we're going to hang out. We're going to come to the worship service too.
Those you need to go to service, but please feel free to.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the
10 years. We worked 4 years on education.
Yeah, no, I know. Thank you. Appreciate it.
One of the keys, family has income at 50.
Good morning, how are you?
They have a chance to have things.
Unfortunately, I'm actually engaged.